All right, since everyone already here, so the motion for today's round is this house would make the majority of the member of the board of directors elected by its employees. So congratulations all of you to coming into this grand final. And now to open the debate, I call upon the Prime Minister. Here.
Am I both visible and audible?
Yes, you are visible and audible.
Pronoun she, her, verbal POIs, please. And if everyone's set, I'll start. In 3, 2, 1, go. When it is the employees themselves helping the company gain profit, they're highly misrepresented in today's society. We're here to solve this, so proud to propose. I want to do 3 main things in my speech today. 1, some points on framing, 2, preemption, and 3 are 2 substantives of 1, representation, and 2, unity. So first, moving on to some points of framing. The board of directors, as said in the info site, they basically control how the company operates. They're just like the Congress of the companies, right? And note that shareholders choose the board of the directors, like in opposition's world. However, and the model of government here is that when it is a time to elect the board of directors, it will be depending on specific circumstances for each company. But for instance, if we say that our company has a 4-year office term, then every 4 years, employees will be voting for these members. Yet note here, as the motion says, the majority, not every single members will be elected through these employees, but note some minority will still can be voted through shareholders. And how this looks like, it will be like just like how we do politics, just like an election system. They will be voting for these board of directors, and note that it will be completely anonymous. The metric of this debate should be which company can operate better with different ways of electing board of directors. And moving on to some preemption, opposition may contest the reliability of decisions made by the employees, and here's the comparative. It is not that on opposition bench they get the super squad of board of directors through shareholders. Shareholders are actually less committed to the company as they can easily pull out their investment. Employees care more about their workplace because that's literally how they earn their living. The movement undersides first substantive of representation. The premise here is that employees having the power to elect the majority of board directors allows them to better represent themselves more within their office environment. A couple of layers here, and 1, why is this true? 2 reasons why these employees deserve this right. First, they're the one that makes the success and profit for these companies. They're the ones who do all the extra work. They're the ones who do the meeting briefings and marketing ads and so on. A second reason, even if you don't buy that, they're severely misrepresented in their office surroundings and lacks protection, right? Companies often don't take care of their employees, especially the bigger the company is, right? Note, like for instance, with Samsung, Samsung would not care about every single employees to them. And note, most of the board of directors only exists in big companies. So in this context of big companies, these companies, they do not have the incentive to care about their employees in the first place. Why is this the case? The bigger the companies are, these major corporations, the SASCO, even if their working conditions are bad, even if they're very misrepresented in their office life, they still want to try to get employed. These people, they still want to get a job in these big brand, big named companies, right? The reputation of the company itself and the fact that you can entitle yourself as a worker in a certain company, this prestige that you can get, will still have employees joining or trying to get recruited, even if they have misrepresentation, right? And we tell you that the fact that these people, the fact that they're misrepresented, this is what we want to solve. Then what is the comparative on both sides here, where employees in our basically are able to have a say in the board of directors, right? Where the board of the directors are actually the ones that decide how the company works and how the company operates. In our world, which we tell that this is pretty much exclusive, we provide more rights and protection as these employees will choose members that will actually make the working environment and working conditions at least better, right? Note that why would these members in the first place try to help these employees? Well, because members want to get picked by employees. If they see that the majority of the members are voted by these employees, then they will try to get proposed or act in a way that can actually help the employees. We tell you that this is actually beneficial. Now, why is this important? We give them a more say. We provide a world where office and companies are not just a prison that gives you money, but where your rights are kept and preserved. We can also balance out the powers between shareholders and the employees, right? In the opposition's world, of where it is usually elected by shareholders, they have the dominant power, and employees are just working robots for them. But we, in our world, we create, or at least add more opinions to it. We create a balance between the shareholders versus the employees. The movement side, second point about unity. So the premise here is that employees are more likely to follow orders from the people they elect rather than random people chosen by shareholders, right? Now, why is this true? So employees chose the board of directors based on their metrics and therefore will trust the board more to operate based on the employee's incentive, right? When this is exclusive and our role, and it's much more likely for employees to commit themselves to the company, to be more loyal to the company if the company structure is tailored towards the needs of these employees, right? For instance, if like employees elect a board of director who guarantee more maternity and paternity leaves, that is pretty essential, especially even like as an individual, which creates a better working environment, etc. They will stay to enjoy the rights they voted for. They will still be very loyal to their company. This is important in the modern context where people are being less loyal to their companies, right? Why is this important? This sort of unity throughout the company creates a more collaborative atmosphere where work efficiency can increase, right? The constant protest would decrease and people will be more compliant and so on. We tell you that in our role, we give a more of a safer environment for these employees. We guarantee their rights. We give them we give more production and we give a more productive atmosphere for these companies overall. So proud to propose.
Thank you so much for that speech. And now to open the case from oppositions, I call upon leader oppositions.
All right, am I clearly audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Starting in 3, 2, 1. A company is a group of essentially owners that then hire people and pay people in exchange for labor, in exchange for them allowing them to use them at their utility, at the expense of course, them getting profit. Now we believe that this is the very system that makes companies so effective and makes them even exist in the first place in today's society. And the very premise that there needs to be a balance of power between those two stakeholders, we say that in and of itself is false. Right, then I'm just going to do some recharacterization before I do two more things in my debate. So first of all, I'm going to recharacterize the debate. Second of all, I'm going to give my first principle justification, which I'll merge with the rebuttals to their argument about unity. Then second of all, I'm going to give you my argument about actually practically nothing changes and nothing is, and in fact, if it changes towards the word side, which is going to pair up with their argument of representation. All right, then first of all, recharacterization, because OG paints up companies in a light in which they're a jail that encages its employees and does not care about them at all. But we think that this characterization is simply inaccurate and uncharitable. Because number one, employees choose the companies that they work for. They sign a contract. They literally provide an application into companies in which they choose to work to. So we believe that in that sense, they can just simply move to another company. But second of all, we say even if that is the case, and even if companies do not care as much about employees as it does for profit, we say there's nothing that's inherently bad about that, because the fact that a company is profit oriented is simply its fundamental nature. And we say that because the people are allowing themselves to be used, we say that is fine. So we say obviously if an employee were to sign a company with the contract with the company, then they're giving their consent for the company to operate the way that it does, which then integrates into my first argument about principal justification. The basic premise is that what happens in a company ought to be in the control of its shareholders, not its employees. First, justification on why overlooking the employees' will is okay. The company in and of itself is a form of property, and if it's someone's capital, this means the means of which they can earn money and control their assets. Their employees then are people who are mutually agreed with them that they will provide labor to them and be utilized for making profit in exchange for some money, which is their salary. Now we say if an employee were to sign up to a company, it is their responsibility to make themselves aware that what the company does, and then willingly decide to work for them. Now, if a person, however, was in desperate need of money or wanted to quit, etc., we say that it's like a completely different scenario in which we believe that they had still consented to whatever situation that they're consenting to. So that we say, to the extent that entering a company and signing a contract is the very action of giving consent for that company to take the most advantage of you and within legal boundaries, not only is there nothing wrong with them doing that once you actually get within the company, which in this case would be electing their own officials and electing their own board of directors, so that those people can then decide what is best within the company's interest and what will best give them the best profit. Then we say, then to the extent that that's true, there's not only is there nothing wrong with them doing that, then it's actually important that they're able to make the decisions that they desire. Not to preempt a response coming from either of the proposition benches saying, now, not if it's at the expense of the employees. We want to provide a clear distinction for when this stands, as long as it is not directly, number one, inflicting their rights, which means they're directly, for example, providing them with physical abuse, or there's directly going like hate speech towards them, as long as it's not that, we say selecting their own board of directors is nowhere near any of those exceptions. In fact, if they want to suggest another way this principle doesn't work, I'll take one from CG right now. 3, 2, 1. All right, then the reason that this principle weighs above all else in this debate, because it's not dependent on a practical outcome. We say that regardless of what ends up happening in the end, the fact that in the process we take away the shareholders' right to control their own property, that in and of itself is something that we believe is morally reprehensible. For us to claim that we need to suddenly make people not control their own property just because we decide some other people that literally decided to work with them and work under them and within whatever they want, just because we decide that means that we believe that is morally reprehensible for us to give those people then the right to control something that they work under. All right, practical then. The basic mechanism is the people who want to get selected for the board of directors can get elected by the company's employees, and in order to get elected by the employees, they must adhere to the employees' interests, especially as now it's the majority. It's likely viewed as the most possible case. Now, 2 possible cases. Number 1, they go around advertising that they adhere to the interests. We believe that because each employee has their own different mindset, obviously, we believe that in order to adhere to the majority's mindset, you need to appeal different things to different people, which oftentimes means that claiming to have several different things that will not work in the end. But also B, after they do that, then let's say they actually do all the things that they promised, then what is so wrong with that? Because then even when we take OG at their best and say that the greater good of the employees is so important, more than that of the stakeholders' right to control its own company, then we end up with a situation in which even the employees that are electing their own board of directors, number 1, have no control over what they do after they're elected. After they elect them, whatever they do is completely out of their control. And we say within the characterization of that proposition provides to us, and in fact, all people, we say these people are also self-interested, very, very proud to be on opening opposition.
Thank you for that speech. Now I call upon Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case from government.
Okay, verbal POIs, please. And I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. 2 things in my speech. First, refutation to the ludicrous case that came from OO, and then finally, I'll do some weighing as to why our side should take first in this debate. First, in terms of refutation, OO firstly frames that employees choose their own companies they work for and therefore sign contracts. This is a relationship built upon consent. This does not consider the status quo of high unemployment rates at all. It is more of, and Seah has already characterized you but did not receive any response to, it is more of companies choosing the employees. It is because there are not insufficient amounts of workplaces, or more of the workplaces that can satisfy these individuals are insufficient, meaning that the companies interview for the employees, companies test the employees. It's not the employees testing the companies, and therefore employees having a complete freedom as to what they can do, and therefore the power structure here is imbalanced, and therefore this consent is not an absolute value here. Then moving on to the principle, this principle is also based on their framing, the justification for consent. 3 things here. First, the extent of the consent is only towards you providing labor for a company and receiving wage, not for you to get exploited by that company. You still have a right, and you still have the freedom to protect yourself from those exploitations. For example, you consenting to be recorded in a debate does not necessarily mean that Roger can make memes out of you and post it all around of internet. The companies cannot stretch the extent of these kind of consents and say that, oh, we can do anything about you and we can entirely control you. And that is the preventive measure for this kind of exploitation, is what we propose as this policy of the board of directors being selected by the employees. But then secondly, on their point of how shareholders should be able to control their own property, that is completely not true. Of course, shareholders will have certain influences. Say I already characterized to you and mechanized this for you why there is a natural incentive for companies to take care of the shareholders, because basically the companies performing well equals the stocks going up, and that is what the shareholders' incentives are. But then secondly, your phone can be your property, but Apple controls what happens in there. Companies still get to control what happens within the company. Shareholders cannot completely dictate the company. If that is the case, then all the shareholders will care about is how to earn more money, whether they exploit the workers or not. And we say that that itself is inherently bad. But finally, and most importantly, what we get from OO is basically them saying that they do not care about the employees at all. They don't care if these employees are not given with maternity leave, paternity leaves, or or not given with sufficient work environments, if they're exploited, if they're not provided with the better enough wage or whatsoever. We said this in and of itself really box themselves out. The second thing they give us is the practicals as to there will be no change being made on our world. They say that because after the election, the board of directors will not care about the companies, but what we have gave you as our policy and as our world was this: even after the election, there can still be a re-election system, and also the fact that these employees are able to elect the board of director also implies that they can pull out and fire these board of directors as well, and therefore there will be an incentive for the board of directors to care about the employees as well, also caring for shareholders, because at the motion stage, only the majority of the board of directors are selected by the employees. The others will be selected by the shareholders, as we are doing in the status quo. What did we tell you in this debate? We told you that one, there's a current lack and a need for representation of employees, and two, a unity formed with this policy, and therefore a better work efficiency in general. The weighing here, but before moving on to the weighing, I'd like to take a POI from closing if there's one. If not, opening. Seeing lack of engagement, let's move on to the weighing. The two metrics that you should use for weighing here is one, in terms of exclusivity, because when we are to weigh the representation of shareholders versus employees, what we told you is there is a pre-existing incentive for companies to care about the shareholders, but the shareholders have leverage called stock, where they can pull out all the investments, and therefore that can completely destroy the companies. The companies will care about shareholders, whether they have a board of directors full of people, friends of shareholders or not. But then on comparison, because in the status quo there's unemployment rates and whatsoever, because the employees are so much more vulnerable in the exploitations of the companies, because the employees cannot really say much even though they are fired, or even though they're giving a worse bad working environment, we say that the representation of employees is much more important and is much more exclusive to our policy. But the second weighing metric is in terms of magnitude. Just like citizens are the biggest actors within a country, employees are the biggest, are basically like the citizens of a company. The satisfaction and the quality of life for employees are vital in the performance of a company. If employees do not work hard, if they just slack off and they just doze off and work, then nothing, the performances are going to lack off, and it's not going to do well for the company in general. We weigh over potential closing claims because we gave you two independent paths to victory. We proved to you why employee representation is important and how that is something that our policy can exclusively achieve. We also proved to you why companies will perform better under our world. For both stakeholders of employees and companies, we benefit them. A board of directors elected by shareholders is like large foreign investors selecting the Congress of a country. That is ludicrous, and therefore we're very proud to be OG.
All right, thank you for that speech. Now I call upon Deputy Leader Oppositions.
Okay, assuming that I'm both visible and audible, we're just gonna turn 7.
Yeah, you're on. Oh, maybe you can speak a little bit louder.
Oh, is this okay? Or
Okay.
I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Just before I get into my actual speech, I'd like to do two things and signposts. So the two main things in my speech: one, I'll be giving direct rebuttals to our opponent, and two, I'll be repeating our team's points. However, before I do that, I'd like to introduce a new point on why the issues such as power imbalance and humanitarian issues will not improve. The primary interest of employees are putting food on the table and gaining money. Their primary goal of what they get from the board of directors is promotion decisions favoring them, etc. Which means that the candidates they select are people that are likely to only prioritize getting money and putting food on the table for their families in any simple context. And they're likely to promote them and not improve the company or their current status quo. Now I'll be moving on to rebuttals of the OG. Firstly, I'll be starting with the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister first states, the Prime Minister comes up and tries to say that the voting system will be a political system where the employees will be able to vote for a member of the board every 4 years or something. And somehow that's in the company's best interest or in the employees' best interest. Okay. A few layers of this. One, I think the government has completely misinterpreted the entire point. If an employee knows that they'll be mistreated and will be severely misrepresented, that they so claim that was a contract that the employees themselves have already signed. Also, by giving employees this power to help them choose a few members of board of directors, the situation can go two ways. One, the board members elected will simply do a complete 180 and not live up to their promises. Or two, the employees can take advantage of the system and instead create a system where the board of member electives now give them a higher will only choose board of member electives that will give them a higher pay wage or something of sorts that we stated previously in my speech. Okay, the reason why this is true is because in any context, it makes sense. If a worker is seriously mistreated, they'll want this higher wage pay where a board member or a board of member elected gives them more and more money. And even though the PM tries to say that this rule only applies to larger companies, it actually applies to any working condition and financial situation. Again, in any context, once again, no thank you, an elective will again take advantage of this employee elective and go back to their promise. If we bite the bullet and if the company is only money and PR concerned, this is not the solution to solve this issue. In contrast, it's actually even better if the company is money hungry or a horrible or a company in general, because these employees aren't completely bound to these companies. Protest and PR criticism is a more realistic situation to this, instead of giving these employees so much power that not only put the company but themselves as well in danger. This entire mechanism that the government has given us so far is such a loophole to such a big. We're not saying that employee rights don't exist. However, this is not the model to solve this issue. Number two, as my ally has stated themselves, an employee is willingly aware of the situation that they put themselves within. Even if they didn't, they could simply just quit, because if you do, you can still get money. And also, why would someone willingly put themselves in the constant cycle of abuse and not just quit? Even with living environment or not, the model does not make sense, because again, as we stated before, we get many examples that in any financial situation, this model just proves to be not effective again and again. Now I'll be moving on to DPM. So we get from OG that companies select employees not the other way around. Two layers of rebuttals to this. So one, putting down someone to a pool of selection is called an application and it's a choice. There were an insufficient amount of good companies. Again, this model isn't the way to fix it at all. How would giving a few additional members within the board of directors give these employees more rights at all? If you think that a couple directors will be able to make a difference at all, these bad companies, a completely unrealistic viewpoint that these workers are so vulnerable that they are permanently linked to these board of directors. In the current status quo, employees and many of them have the ability to easily quit and make a choice and post easily on multiple platforms where they're being so mistreated. I have no tries to continue to push this narrative that employees are so vulnerable when they're not. If you think more realistically, this model can and will never work. Now, however, before I end the speech, I like to go to thinking never been prouder to propose.
Thank you for that speech. Now to open the closing half, I call upon member of government.
Before I start, can I check that I'm both audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Great. Prefer pronouns she, her. I'll take all POIs verbally, won't be checking the chat. With that said, speech starts. 3, 2, 1. Go. The world that opposition side promotes in today's debate is where a blindfolded people selecting directors just by grasping the thickness of the dollar stack that the candidates can bring to them. And we tell you that this is ridiculous. 3 things I'm going to do in my speech. First of all, I'll move on to reputation. Second of all, some clarifications. Third of all, I'll present my extension based upon the symbolism of this action in and of itself and the societal change it can bring. So firstly, moving on to the reputations for OO. Firstly, they keep on stating, oh, just like shareholders, employees can move to other companies. No. Firstly, this does not stand because it's not as easy as shareholders simply taking their money out of that investment of that certain company, because the difference stands as the shareholders are financially stable if they are actually investing in these major companies at the end of the day. The difference is that these employees are financially unstable in search of a job, and in this society in general, there are not a lot of jobs open to them at the end of the day. So we tell you that this is not as easy. They are going to be forced to stay. We tell you that this is not the world or the conditions that we want these employees to live in at the end of the day. Second of all, like what the OO is doing is they blame the employees instead of the shareholders, just saying that shareholders have control over their own property. No, shareholders are investing in the company itself as a whole company. It's just one part of what they're investing in. And we cannot say that this is their property. They do not have the right to choose the directors who can dictate the conditions of the employers because they simply do not have that much power. They only own a portion of the company. We tell you that employees should not be considered a property of the shareholders. At the end of the day, I'll prove that later. No, thank you. We tell you that the contract that they made in the first place of the employees cannot stand if its term is different without consent at the end of the day, because employees are still people. They still want humane working conditions. On our role, we will prove why employees are able to not only focus on their conditions, but the company. With that said, moving on to my argumentation. Before doing that, I'll take the POI.
When these shareholders were given the option to like invest in these companies, they were firstly given the option to pick the board of directors in the first place.
Right?
You
But
were
exactly,
infringing on
that's
this
why
right.
yeah, sure. Because that was how society was structured. We tell you that we'll change that because it's not right and it's immoral. Right. Moving on to my argumentation based upon the symbolism of the action. We tell you there's 3 points of analysis. Firstly, moving on to the micro scale of the workers. Employees are as assets to companies and they are extremely valuable. So allowing employees to participate in the selection of board members signals that their voices actually matter and are valued within the organization itself. What this does is that this fosters a sense of ownership and engagement among workers as they feel empowered to shape the direction of the company and contribute to its success at the end of the day because they have more power over themselves. When employees feel that their perspectives are considered in high-level decision-making processes, such as their own wages, and basically they're the Congress of the whole company, as the opening half has mentioned, they're more likely to feel motivated and committed to the organization's goals. This leads to higher levels of productivity and loyalty, job satisfaction among the workers at the end of the day. No one is likely to leave such a considering company. They are financially stable. This meets these goals better than the current status quo, where they're suddenly just there and having to stick to this contract that keeps on changing because the shareholders are profit-driven, etc., etc. Second layer of analysis on the company. By implementing employee involvement in these selections, the company sends a powerful message to society about its commitment to A, democratic principles, and B, inclusivity of the voices of the employees. It demonstrates that the organization itself values the input of all stakeholders, not just shareholders, because they're like so important in their eyes. This enhances basically the company's image and reputation in the eyes of the customers, investors, the public, the shareholders, etc., etc. This leads to better company economics and so on and so forth, a stable number of workers. This is ideal for the company comparatively to right now, where it's just shareholders, there's no enhancement of reputation, so on. Third layer of analysis based upon the society, we tell you that adopting employee involvement reflects a widely accepted societal norm of promoting democracy, transparency, and basically the promotion of employees' rights, which are very important in today's status quo. And we tell you that this creates a better societal norm, a better society overall that can actually, by raising standards for working conditions and employee rights across industries, which makes better conditions for workers, the companies, and the society. We don't see what's wrong about this as well. So moving on to the conclusion and quick weighing. So what do we provide to you and why do we win over OG and OO? OG, they mention the volatility of stakeholders. They mention all valid points. What we're able to do is that expand that to bring in more stakeholders at the end of the day and prove why that are and fully leash out why this alternative is better in terms of all scales from micro to macro at the end of the day. And we're better able to refute to the OO. What we do better than the OO's case is firstly boxed out by themselves already, but we already like demolished the case of the OO because they're unable to provide enough mechanization. And we tell you that we want a society where employees are not blindfolded and are fully respected, thereby creating companies' improvement, reputation increasing, and societal change. Very proud to propose CG.
Thank you so much for that speech. Now I call upon the member of oppositions to open the case on CO.
Let me get my stopwatch and notes out. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The path to sorry, restart. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The path to victory in our side is very clear. First on framing, which the opening side has never mentioned, right? Firstly, on natural democratic vote margins and how it's going to work. Naturally, it's going to be a 49 and 51% split or something along the lines. This is what a stable democracy looks like, because if not, then everyone else's policies will be so bad that it doesn't even turn into a democracy anymore. And if any other side wants to rebut this piece of framing, they can, but they will eventually lose. So don't even bother to yap. Okay, so polarization is not, so therefore polarization is naturally going to undergo. This is also a unique extension that I'll get to later on. Secondly, a unique piece of additional framing, we are going to give them the option to speak out to these speak out to these like shareholders on like employees, and so like these employees can actually have their voice and see, and then these shareholders can see what the employees actually want. I mean, this is just a better like counterfactual. Third, we know this motion is talking about in perspective of the companies and its actual practical impacts. So we believe that just like moral implications, they kind of lack relevance because it's about the companies, and like as long as they can as long as they have the most financial gain, that is the thing that we're trying to achieve. Okay, now on incentives and analysis for incentives. Okay, firstly, there's incentives for, let's talk about the incentives for the stakeholders. It's naturally to make the company as successful and as prosperous as possible. This in return benefits the people because they get more wages as the company develops, and they have made they have a formidable position to, therefore. Secondly, as Bill said, quality of employees is vital for the economy, right? So we let these stakeholders are just not dumb enough to completely ignore this. And if what he said is true, they would recognize this and give them enough working conditions to suffice, right? We don't get how like shareholders won't have like this knowledge. You guys are assuming they're just like stupid people in the first place. The rest of my rebuttals on
Why?
the rest of my rebuttals on closing will happen later, but I'll take the PL.
Okay, who knows the company better? The employees actually working there or the shareholders just investing their money inside the company?
We've already added a framing on we're just gonna give them like an option to vote, and this means not an option to vote, but like an option to like speak out their opinions. This is just like a direct confrontation, which is just going to be better, like regardless. I don't get what you're yapping about here. Okay, now on our unique extension. First, on negative impacts of taking away powers from stakeholders. Firstly, on principle justification, it's just not principally justified to take power from the stakeholders in the first place, and this will also engage on what like the CG's like kind of new extension is, right? When these stakeholders invested in this company, they recognize that they had inherent unchangeable powers, right? One of these indeed is the power to choose the board of directors. The investments they made is going to be overall gone because they're obviously going to speak out of this, which leads me on to practical harms, right? And like the closing tries to rebut this by saying that like this aspect in and of itself is immoral. However, we don't believe like these shareholders like having the power to having invested knowing they had the power to do this is immoral in the first place, right? So in order for your side to be principally justified, you need consent among the shareholders, because like the shareholders are only playing the game. They're not like intentionally trying to cause harm. These like we just from the get-go we recognize that it was moral in the first place. So which means that your alternative is going to have to pay like the shareholders loads of money in order to fix this principally unjustified case, which we don't believe is feasible. Secondly, on the practical harm, we got these stakeholders whom are vital to the company. They're going to pull out in investments, right? They're going to feel as if they're cheated and lost all their power, because like their main source of power and their main source of like a thing that's like, I guess, principally unjustified in your case is gone. And even if the impacts are the same, we should win under this condition. Second, on like the more practical side of things and why we win on this, right? Okay, a unique extension on why the greatest practical harm in our case is polarization. When 49 and 51% of the people are being polarized due to like the innate nature of democracy, the board cabinet would note that to get elected, they just need to appeal to 51% of the people. And this makes each side hate each other, right? Because it's not actually going to be like, even if it is the majority of the people being represented, it's just it's almost like half of the people are just not getting their voice at all. This isn't the side that they're opting, right? And we got the board of directors is actually going to represent only 50%, which is like not the majority, which I guess is the majority, but not enough, right? The comparative here is that in our side, no one has a unique advantage for absolutely no reason. That is the thing that keeps us fair and keeps everyone equal in this case, right? So in conclusion, what have I said in my speech? Firstly, I've given like key pieces of framing on like how democratic voting margins work. I've also added a framing that like that dismisses their argument on like these board of directors like know this company better. And I've given two unique extensions that are round winning. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that speech. Now I call upon the government whip to close government case.
Assuming that I'm both audible and visible, I will only be taking verbal POIs, and my speech starts in 3, 2, 1, go. As individuals who manage the working conditions of a company, the board of directors should have a clear image of what it's like to be working at their company and the wants and needs of employees, i.e., a qualified board of directors should not be profit-driven, but have the ability to put themselves in the shoes of the employee that has a first-hand experience of what it's like to work in that company. Therefore, CG. So two things I'm going to do. First of all, rebuttals, and second of all, clashes. So rebuttals, their mechanism about giving employees an option to vote is extremely vague, and I like to call upon the opposition whip to engage on this. So the previous speaker talks about financial gain. Sure, financial gain is a priority. We get that. However, that does not mean that we then allow random shareholders to elect our board of directors. Think about who shareholders usually are in reality, right? It could be your teacher, your dad, and even a child, so on and so forth. Frankly speaking, they have nothing to do with these companies, right? Do people like this know what they're doing with the company? I don't think so. They talk about polarization and democracy. Just to make things clear, democracy is non-existent in their side of the house. The employees are literally getting controlled by random shareholders. On our world, we still benefit their shareholders because we have better motivated and satisfied employees. More profit, and which then leads on to more profit, and they don't even have this. I'll take that later. But they mentioned that employees can speak out against the decision of stakeholders. Where is this going? Moreover, power imbalance. How effective would it be, and why would shareholders care? I call upon the opposition whip to engage on this. So moving on to my clashes, benefits for the company. At the end of the day, you are not qualified to manage the working conditions of a company solely because you own whatever percentage of the company, right? Rather, a person who has a deep understanding of the current working conditions most likely knows the strengths and weaknesses, which can eventually boost the company's profits, which is what we call qualified. I'll take that later. If this motion passes, we all know that employees are going to get the chance to elect the members of board of directors. This means that employees are going to be more satisfied with their working conditions. Am I right? At the end of the day, this means that employees are motivated to work harder. Notice that employees are not robots that work without any kind of payback, right? Everyone hates to work. The vast majority of the employees are only set food on their table. I'll take that later. Imagine what would happen if your working conditions are managed by people who do not even know what the working conditions are like in your company. Obviously, you would feel less motivated because your opinions are on how working conditions should be managed is not taken into account. And this is where their opposition characterization comes in. So vice versa, let's picture what happens in our side of the house, right? You are able to express your opinions through electing board of directors that you know for a fact that would boost the company's profit as well as enhance your working conditions, right? Moreover, now that you were, I'll take the. Moreover, now that you are not considered a piece of, you're not considered a working bot. You feel a sense of belonging and that you are valued in the company. And if so, we believe that this is obviously a driving force that motivates you to invest your effort into the company. And at the end of the day, I'll take that later. We are able to provide two benefits, which is number one, overall working condition and satisfaction from employees, which then leads to number two, company profit. I'll take that POI. 3.
Okay. Why would a car company such as Hyundai, for example, appoint an artist as a board of director, as that's the world you're trying to portray right now?
Where a shareholder wouldn't really care about the working conditions, which is why they will only care about the profit. However, if they're trying to make profit, what do they know about the company? They're not even working there. However, the employees literally work there. They have firsthand experience of what it's like to be working in the company. So we don't really know where this is going. And number two, efficiency. So moving on to my speech. As all sides of the house agree, the one and only interest of shareholders are profit, right? If they cannot boost the annual profit that they make from the rising stocks, they're not going to be interested. So what does this suggest?
At the end of the day, this suggests that they're probably going to do anything that ultimately boosts their profit. If shareholders get to manage the working conditions of a company and many more, we do not know where this is going. Both OO and CEO keeps on running their case on their assumption that employees are going to take advantage of electing their board of directors. However, we didn't ask you. We would much rather trust them because again, they know what's best for the company, and rather than making strangers that frankly speaking has nothing to do with the working conditions, make very, very important decisions. And moreover, the reason behind state shareholders actually investing in certain companies is because they're convinced that they will make massive amounts of profit from it. For example, the only reason why you invest your stocks into Apple or into Samsung is because you know that you will gain individual profit from it, right? Shareholders taking a wild guess and picking a random individual that looks like will make a lot of good decisions cannot be justified under the title of they should get to choose whatever they do with their property, right? Moreover, think about how immoral it is for the CEO to run their case based on how employees of companies our shareholders are. Like our speaker has mentioned, it's not that easy to move companies as soon as it does not feel right for them. Therefore, I've never been prouder to propose. Therefore, CEO. Thank you.
Okay. Speech begins in 3, 2, 1. Judge, I've never seen a clearer win of our side. The reason of this is because CG and OO already from the get-go boxed themselves out. Why do they do this? Let's explain as to why we think CG is already boxed out of this debate. This is because they're trying to come up here to talk about how there's no expertise of the directors coming in and the candidates coming in. Judge, notice how flabbergasting this point is. Obviously, companies such as Hyundai, who are car companies, are going to pick their board directors to be people from the car industry. Obviously, tech industries are going to pick candidates who know tech and have expertise in that area. It is unstrategic for companies to pick directors that do not have the expertise in that area. I do not see how this point runs, but they do not be charitable. They do not explain the mechanism as to how they provide this, and obviously the rest of the content that they provide is derivative of OG. I think CG is already losing this debate to OG. Okay, so what am I going to do in my speech? I'm going to integrate the rebuttals, why we win over the other sides in two main clashes. Number one, why we have a better company in terms of economics and a better company. But second, I'm going to talk about how we have a better condition for work and for jobs. Okay, let's move on to the first clash. Why do we have a better company? We have less polarization within employees. I think JS gave you a very unique extension as to how we have less polarization. This is because more employees are happier of the board of director. It's not a 51 to a 49 situation where 49% and 51 is divided, because the board candidate would know that just to get elected, they would need to appeal to 51% of the people. They're not going to take the effort to persuade the other 49% of the people. This is the most realistic portrayal of what's going to actually happen. So let's say the director is selected for you. They need to make everyone happy in our side of the world. Why is this so? If employees start decreasing in productivity because they say, oh, the director who came is like new is absolutely trash, I don't like that guy, that means these employees feel less motivated to work. Then what happens is that because of the less productivity, company profit was starting to decrease, and thus the board of director will probably be replaced. So the board of director needs to engage with everyone and the employee to maximize their profit. Sure, it might sound mutually exclusive, but what's mutually exclusive on their world? Their side has a us versus them mindset. That is to say, it reinforces a segregation and polarization between management and staff, because the staff is literally voting for the management. There's this more polarization between the management and staff, which obviously will decrease the productivity. I'll take one POI, preferably from opening.
OG told you that shareholders will be cared for no matter what. The most important analysis was that there's a lack of corporate incentive to care about employees as they're easily replaceable. Please be the first speaker on opposition bench to engage with our extensive weighing.
Clearly, because OO did not engage, I'll actually do that for you. The reason employees cannot be easily fired is because government policies, such as in South Korea, defends employees from being fired easily. That is to say, South Korea has laws that companies have to follow, that employees cannot be fired easily. And we say that this law is spread within international society, and this law prevents companies from, for example, firing a person for no reason just because the employee opposed them. That is how hard firing a person is, because they're protected by legal backgrounds. So where was I? Okay, so the staff doesn't feel Let's move on. So the director selected you. The board has to select the board director, and the board director has to make sure that everyone is happy so that the productivity is increased, so that the shareholders notice that oh, this new board director we picked is actually useful. So what happens? The employees are treated equally and better at a more higher rate than the 5149, because the only thing that's stopping these board directors is the 5149. They're gonna be like, oh, the only thing I need to do to get my job is to influence 51% of the people on our side of the world to keep your job, to increase productivity. You need to appeal to everyone. So why does OO box themselves out? I think our opening is getting on the right path, but not there yet. Yes, employees work to put food on their table. We create a better company because we have we have a company where the board of directors is more commonly even at their worst case marginally liked by the employees, even more increasing productivity, which at the end of the day, because then the increased productivity means more sales, more beneficial, and for the economics of the company, what happens is that you gain more benefits such as maternity leave or, for example, bonuses or such, because the company has more resources to offer that to you. On their side of the world, Judge, there is no incentive for these people, for the board of directors to do anything at all for the rest of the 49%. We say that the increased likability of these people is exclusive, we say. So let's move on to the second clash. Shareholders have incentives to do good for the employees. Why is this say? Let's say the government at their best. Let's say that there's a better work environment. This is symmetrically achievable on our side of the world. But shareholders want their employees to feel motivated to work. Their investment and profit depends on the efficiency of the company to earn capital. When we have increased motivation for board members to treat employees well, citizens like for example, citizens in democratic systems are like the shareholders in the democratic vote. Governments need to conform to citizens because citizens have more power. Companies need to conform to shareholders because shareholders have more power. Employees have less power. Why is this so? Let's say that the board of directors on government's best case gets voted with like 70% of employees voting for him. What is keeping him from treating employees differently than how he was campaigning? Because he is not held down by the burden of conforming to the shareholders anymore. His job is not in the line of the shareholders. He just simply has more power now. Shareholders, as mentioned, has a higher power to the board of directors. Board of directors' jobs are on the line. They need productivity to keep their position. Government's trying to say like, oh, only like a few people, but still the majority is basically the same thing. If you want a world and if you want a company where it's far more effective and a better workplace, feel free to choose for our side. If you want to see a company that fails, go for it, government.
All right, thank you for so much for that speech.
Thank you for the debate, everyone. Thank you for the
Thank you
debate.
for the debate.
Judges.